sensitive knowledge as found in brutes. This is 6b, little a. There are degrees of sensitive knowledge to be found even in brutes, amongst brutes. That is, animals which are non-rational or non-reasoning animals. Some have the sense of touch only. This is the least sensitive knowledge or sensitive life that an animal can have. It's the most basic one. And the animals are divided up according to this, that they may only have touch. For instance, some of the shellfish on the ocean, they may have touch and taste. That's possible. It's not of that great importance as far as we're concerned. Might be interesting for somebody to know that. But if an animal has touch, taste, and smell, then that's another species of animals. Now remember how the biologist treats animals, classifies them, puts them into the various classes of things they belong to. They do it by shape and operation, by the movement of things or by the shape of these things, and similarities of parts, that sort of thing. But the philosopher, he'll classify them differently, according to the very nature of the being. If the form has the sense of touch or has the sense of taste, they're two different things. Now, a snake and an elephant, as far as the philosopher is concerned, might be the same species. They appear to have the same number of senses. All the higher animals have similar senses to man, but biologists get carried away because a monkey has a little similarity to man, and it's only one little thing, one gene that makes a difference. They'll call them same species. So an ant and a different species or a similar species to the one with the same number of powers, notwithstanding the shape. We could say that they're like two species of monkeys. Now that would be one species according to the philosopher, but maybe two species according to the biologist. It might be, they'll call one lizard, for instance, in Australia, the bearded lizard. They'll call another lizard the guana. But these are different kind of lizards. But they're specifically, maybe philosophically, the same. But they're different because the frill lizard, every time it gets angry, its big frill comes up each side of the face. I'll show you a picture of that one night. Or maybe send it on the internet or something. But, so, some only have the sense of touch. Philosophically, they could be the same species. But, like Dr. Little, a biochemist, suggested once, there's only just a small integral difference between man and a brute animal. Yes, but it just happens to be infinitely different. Infinitely, the gap. Man has just one more power, he thinks. So therefore, we're closely related. But the power is infinitely different from that a monkey has, for instance. No matter how much you cross it, there's more to go. That's the notion of the infinite. No matter how much you take, there's more to come. You can go on taking and never finish. That's the notion of the infinite. In finis. Finis means finish, and in means without, in this case. Without finish. So, the term species has a different meaning than for the scientist, because the philosopher considers the being, the nature of the animal, whereas the scientist considers the appearances, the being of the animal, his anatomy, physiology, etc. It can be readily shown that animals have sense organs and powers, for they respond with the same activities as man does when there is a stimulus. A horse will turn its head in the direction, their heads in different animals in the direction of the sounds. I once went up, followed a kangaroo pad in central New South Wales on Jack Perrett's sheep station. He said to me, looking out over the fields earlier that day before, I think it was, "You see that big bugger out there? If you can get him, I'll dance at your wedding." I was on my honeymoon. What's he talking about? So I went up this pad this day, this kangaroo pad as we call it, a track path that they wore up in the hills, and I came across a kangaroo about 6 feet tall. A big grey it was. And I got up next to a tree and I'm aiming the rifle. I knew the sights may not be too accurate because I dropped the rifle and hadn't had time to correct the sights. Anyway, I focused on him. But what I noticed, he saw me, he's facing me because this is a clearing up in the mountains, and he looked at me like that. And he swiveled around, he's looking around all around him to see if there's any other enemies there, because usually they associate dogs with man. He looked around there, and of course, if a kangaroo gets cornered, they run from dogs, of course, but if it gets cornered, it'll turn and go back on its back legs, its tail rather, and rip the dog open. But I saw and watched the way it was manoeuvring. It sort of like swiveled on its rear part of its body, and but it's looking around, and all of that manifests that it had sight, imagination, and its delicacy, and its ears were twitching like a horse's does, like that. And he was focusing to try and see if there's any dogs or anything else that he should be wary of, because he knew that I was there at one end of the pad where he was going right into the clearing now. So animals do that. And
excuse me, did you shoot him?
No, I fired a shot, and I saw his ears twitch, and I thought the sights must be out. So then I looked, he stared at me, and I backed off, and I said, I was only kidding. It's funny. Once I think I mentioned I was on the Pigeon Loft Mountain, and I ran across a parrot that I couldn't find the path. I mentioned that recently, didn't I? We went up the Pigeon Loft Mountain, and I couldn't find my way down the mountain. I got lost. And a man a year or two before that on horseback got lost up there. And it was easy enough following the path going up, but I couldn't find the path going back, track as we call it. And I went into a bush, and everywhere I went it was straight in bush could be very tough. And I walked in, here's a parrot about 4 feet from me, big white cockatoo, feeding off nuts there. And I said, look, I'd like to stay and chat, old fellow, but we haven't been introduced after all. It's funny how you get a sense of humour at oddest times, isn't it? But I actually said that to the parrot. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What did he answer?
He just looked at me and thought, you dumb cluck. So, but the parrot was watching me. He was eating, but he was watching me. And the same with all kind of animals. I killed a brown snake, which is the second deadliest snake in the world on one occasion. Only a young one. But I was going up the mountain in Queen Mary Falls, I think they called at the time, and in the border between New South Wales and Queensland. And I had a camera up high, strapped up high, and looking at this gorgeous springtime wattle, which is the national flower of Australia, incidentally. Big blossom or balls of fluff, golden colour with light green leaves. Absolutely gorgeous to see a forest of that. Something said look down, and I did. What caused me to look down? I don't know. But don't try and tell me there's no guardian angel. I leapt back about 6 feet, and my heart was pounding. Then I finally got a stick, and I came up to it, and I hit it so hard in the baked clay, I think it built a furrow, dug a furrow like that, and severed it just behind the head. But you know, it was still trying to bite the stick. The head was hanging on by a piece of skin. It was still, they say they don't die till sundown. This is what story I've often heard. But all those animals, they're alive. They've got knowledge. They've got maneuverability, got specialised parts of the body for knowing things, touch, taste, etc. I don't mean the sort of taste the Australian Aborigines always had. They were delighted in eating snakes, cooking them and eating them. That's our taste. Yeah. So, they all have sense organs and powers, for they respond with the same activities as man does when there's a stimulus. For example, they turn their heads in the direction of the sounds, etc. Much is written on this subject, but is not very important for our course. The highest animals, the vertebrates, have the same sensitive powers as man. Now, the distinction of senses according to objects. The power is specified by the act, and the act is specified by the object. For instance, sight, the power of sight. In other words, can see, is specified by the act of sight, does see, which is specified by the object. Expanded colour. Expanded colour. What's thrown up in front of the power specifies it. Specifies means make into the species. Two Latin words, species, facere, to make the species of thing. Determine what the species is. The object determines the species of knowledge. So the power, there's the potency. Potency. The act, there's the act. And no, to go back to metaphysics, no potency can actualize itself. For instance, let's say the intellect. If my intellect made itself think, that would mean it thinks before it thinks. That's contradictory. It thinks when it does not think. That's contradictory. Sight can't make itself see. It's moved over by something which actualizes the power. Remember that in metaphysics. We studied that. No power can actualize itself. What actualizes sight ultimately is the object. And the illuminated object at that for sight, the illuminated object for the sight. So that's how we distinguish the senses, according to their objects. Father Regis, when I was at the University of Montreal, said to the class, 1/3 of all philosophy is contained in this principle. And I'll write it on the board. Acts, habits, and powers are specified by their formal object. Acts, habits, and powers are specified by their formal objects. Specified by their formal objects. Another way you could say that is they're distinguished by their formal objects. The form in the object. There's the object. The blue colour is the form. The form in the object, the formal object, specifies. If it had a savour, a flavour, I could put it in my mouth and say the object of taste is the savorous. Hearing, specified by this object. That is to say, the body as soundy. In other words, causing a sound to be made. So acts, habits, and powers are specified or distinguished by their formal objects. 1/3 of the whole of philosophy comes into that. When somebody's writing about the psychology of angelic beings, much more can be said about that than you realise. We've got to determine by their formal objects. What's the formal object of their knowledge? What's God's formal object? What's the object of God's knowledge? There's no distinction of that in God. He's all pure actuality. There's no potency whatsoever in God. That's what some writers don't seem to realise. So the power is measured by the act, and the act by the object. In the case of sight, it's extended colour. Now note these various statements. Listen to this now. I see. I imagine that I see. I remember as past what I see. I understand that I see. I will that I see. I know that I see. I evaluate what I see. So by what we're doing there is we're distinguishing various powers. So this is for brutes as well as man. We know, for instance, they say the elephant never forgets. he's got a memory. Apparently snakes do too. A film was made in Egypt about that many years ago when I was probably a teenager, I think. There was a film. They tormented what do you call them? Cobra. Tormented a cobra. I was in Ceylon, by the way, and I saw a fellow playing his pipe there, and he's got a basket, and he lifts the lid off, and his pipe puts his hand in and says, "Come out, you beggar." And goes on, go and play. The thing took a look at me and said, "Oh, not that," and crawled back in again. So he yanks it up again, because probably the thing's had its fangs pulled out, you know. But it was the silliest looking cobra I ever saw. I wouldn't be afraid of a cobra. By the way, a book on snakes I saw in Ottawa said that there's no nation more terrified of snakes than Australia. They poke fun at Australians, but by golly, if you had the snakes we have, you would. Anyway, but many people, like people living now around the street from me, although I saw snakes coming from a swamp area down the back of where I lived, which was a national park, a state park, by the way, they said they'd never seen a snake. So there are people who never see snakes. Snakes also have to run when they hear us coming. Except a small brown snake turned and came at me one day. It was only a little fellow, about that big. And I was having a look and said, "What the heck is that? A lizard or what?" "Oh, it's a brown snake." And he came straight for me.
He had no memory to make him run away.
No, he sensed the fear that was in me, I think. I was scared to hell. I got away from it. Pardon?
I thought your pheromones were very much communicating with him.
That's right. So now we're going to examine these various objects and see what each one of them does. We're going to examine, first of all, the sense powers in animals, brute animals, and then examine them in man, because they perform higher functions in man. So let's clear the board. We can do a bit better there. But don't forget that acts, habits, and powers are specified by their formal objects. By the way, I should make known what Dr. Bonnet and I have been discussing for some time. We could issue a certificate for having as an auditor for this course. If you want to do an exam, I could give you an exam. Set an exam for you. If anybody wants to do exams and apply for credit for it somewhere, I don't know whether they'll give you the credit, but things like that have happened in the past. They've got credit for courses, but certainly as an auditor, we could give a nice certificate if you. But you've got to have attended at least 85% of the classes. It worries me that people don't come to class because they're missing the continuity of the course, and so many parts are being built up on one another. You possibly could see that already. So now, I just mentioned that because I thought some warning should be given. So make sure you've signed in every night. If there's anybody not signed in now, we've got the... Good. Well, who's got the... Oh, thank you very much. We diagrammatize it in a certain way, and this is in your notes, of course. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Consider 5 fingers. In Latin, they're all named something, and in French, some of them are named too. We don't seem to do it in English. According to, this is the ear finger, or something like that, the Romans did. And in other languages, it's done that way too. But these are like the 5 fingers of the whole hand. Now, this one we call touch. Now, there are 2 touches, apparently, but this is not very important, but we should know. One which notes the hard and the soft, in other words, the resistance. But the other touch registers different temperatures, in other words, the heat, hot and cold. So there could be 2 touches. Not terribly important, but it's important enough to mention. Then we've got what? Taste, smell, hearing, and sight. They're like the 5 fingers. What is the hand? Which is the hand? We call it the whole thing, don't we? Well, they're joined here as if in the palm of the hand. Now, there are a few things to note about the various senses. Touch not only knows the resistance of the thing, but it knows the presence of the thing. Touch not only notices the resistance or the heat of the thing, but it also registers or knows the presence of the thing. Sight is the furthest away from the present. So in a way, they become more spiritual as it goes along, less material as it goes along. They're all modifications of touch in many ways. They're all modifications of touch, but one of them registers the immediacy of the touch, and the others are gradually receding from the touch. Touch is the most material one, and basically the most basic of all the senses. I've flown over the island of Molokai in the Sandwich Islands, or Hawaiian Islands, same thing. And every time I fly over Molokai, I think of Father Damien, who you may or may not know volunteered to work amongst the lepers, yes. And the first time he knew he had leprosy, he said, "Something's burning, what's that?" It was his own heel. He'd stepped on some coal out of the fire that was warming them there, and he didn't realise his own flesh was burning. Sense of touch goes. Now, but we distinguish sight from hearing. I know if I'm hearing something or if I'm seeing something. What was that film where a man working in South America had what do they call it, a bride, by email bride? No,
Mail order?
Mail order bride? Mail order bride.
mail order bride, that's it, thank you. He had this woman come there to live, and they turned out to be two different kind of characters. And so finally they decided to part. And they hadn't married yet, of course. And with the district commissioner, they went downriver to take her to a big city where there was a ship would take her back to England. And during the night, she suddenly startled. She's in a tent, and she's sort of startled. She got, something's wrong, what's wrong? She went out, and here's the husband-to-be standing with the district commissioner, and she said, "What's wrong? I don't hear anything." They said, "That's it. There's nothing to hear." Why not? In jungle noises weren't there. See, if we are cut off from hearing, it's amazing what can happen to us. They had an experiment on television in Australia one occasion. And the hearing, they tested a man's hearing. He had light, he had a clock. As a matter of fact, it was just the same as this clock here. He's lying there in a room all by himself. We had a one-way window, or whatever it's called, and you could see him, but he couldn't see us. And they showed you the various things changed, psychological changes he went through. No sound. And he was very disturbed because there was nothing to hear. Hearing is basic to our whole operation. And the clock started to leer at him, it wobbled, etc. They used this kind of technique on Cardinal Mindszenty and others in Czechoslovakia, where they tortured them. The Reds tortured them. So the other thing I was going to say. So compare this with the palm of the hand. We call that, it's given a number of names, sense consciousness. Sense consciousness. In Latin it's called sensus communis, common sense. But common sense in English means another thing, and in modern languages means something else. So we don't call it that when we're teaching philosophy. We could in teaching it in Latin, but not in English. Sense conscious makes us conscious of our senses, sensation. I see. I know I see. I see, and I'm conscious that I see. I see, now I'll give it another name. Common sense. I see the pen. I know that I see the pen. I hear the pen, and I know that I hear the pen. I know that what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is the same thing. The two powers are united. I'm conscious that I see it. Now, I can see the pen, but I hear the noise over there. So I distinguish one from the other. Sense consciousness enables us to do that. Conscious of our sensation. It's sometimes called the unitive sense. Unitive sense. So that's sense consciousness. Now, so it's a sort of a fulcrum or a balance point of our whole waking lives. I know that I'm seeing. Now we have a storehouse for that. A storehouse. I talked about a kangaroo earlier tonight. I know that I see it in its absence. I can see the kangaroo in its absence. What's that called? No, everybody goes for memory. Imagination. Stored in its absence. If the thing is known in its absence, I know that I'm imagining it, I'm not seeing it. I know that I'm seeing something, but thinking of this, I can distinguish the two of them. Now, am I seeing you all there, or what's only an image? I might look at my past images. See, that distinguishes sense consciousness. Now, but amongst the brute animals, they have another power called the estimative sense. The estimative sense. And the estimative sense allows us to evaluate what is known as pleasing or harmful. Pleasing or harmful. So the estimative sense can enable us to, the animal, to estimate things. The Borkham Hills St. Michael's Orphanage, which Father Woodbury and I used to advise and do a little thing with cattle and their build up their herd there, etc. I won't go into that, but I used to watch the cattle. We dammed up a creek, and it was dammed up there, and water was building up, beautiful sheet of water for watering the cattle at the grass for feed. But it gets a bit muddy around the edges, and there was a bridge going over here, and I've seen the cattle sort of walking, don't like that, so they go over the bridge. Plank two missing, they'd step over the plank, etc. They could estimate things, estimate the value of a thing as pleasing or harmful. So that was the function of the estimative sense, to estimate certain things as pleasing or harmful. So this is the balance of the life of an animal: sense consciousness and estimative sense. Sense consciousness, it preserves the images in the imagination. They're known in their absence, in absentia. Now, these are evaluated. I'm using those terms just as shortish. But it also has a storehouse, known as evaluated in the past. So, like the dog that went to snap the heels of my two little nieces, they're coming home from school. I remember my mother saying, go and escort them up there. I said, I'll take better. And I took some, I think it was my tripod I took. Nice knob at the end, with the 3 legs coming out, made of aluminum, but with a solid chromed metal at the top. And the dog came straight out to the 2 nieces, and I went whack. Boy, it ran every time it saw me after that, or it didn't go near the girls. So it estimated me as something harmful, and it stored it. And we call this sensitive memory. Pardon? You which?
We're sharing a joke.
Oh, sorry. Sensitive memory. Value in the past. Valued in the past. It's the storehouse of sensitive memory. Now we're talking about the higher animals. it'd be probably very foolish to say that an oyster has a memory, for instance. There may be other things in the oyster. Maybe something else like a storage of what we call customizations. We'll come to that later. So there's the higher animals, the higher the vertebrates. Remember, the animal kingdom is divided into two kinds. Vertebrates, or those with a backbone. Invertebrates, those without a backbone. And we're talking about the higher vertebrates here. The others, it's very difficult to determine whether they've got taste, etc. As for smell, probably not, the invertebrates. So first the animal sees something. It knows it's not touching. Sense consciousness tells it it knows. Each of these has an organ. Each one of these. They're the organic powers known as senses. Senses always have an organ. The power and the sense are distinct. The organ subserves the power. It's ordered to be a slave, as it were, of the power. So in sight, for instance, which is there's an immateriality, goes from touch right up to sight, gradual immateriality. And sight, it has about 200 operations for one act of seeing, which enables the thing to restructure the sight, to restructure it so it's ready to absorb that colour. It has to be restructured, certain restructuring going on there. Now the sense consciousness makes us conscious of whether we're actually imagining or actually seeing it. That's its normal function. To imagine a thing, am I imagining or am I seeing things? Imagination can be very treacherous, as we know. What was that in the dark? I heard a noise. I know there's something out there. I heard a noise. Then later you get to know, oh, thank God it's Bill. Something like that. So sense consciousness is the balance wheel. It tells us if we're operating from sensitive memory or we're actually seeing a thing. And as you can see, there's a gradual immaterialization in this. I think it was Dr. Mary Hayden. I directed her master's degree on research on this. Her thesis, I think, was on this. Pretty sure that's what it was, the immaterialization of the senses. So there's a greater recession from the actual physical connection with the thing. There are other ways we could diagrammatize this, but I like this way. It's easy to remember. The unitive sense is the fulcrum, the balance point. And when that is bound, as Aristotle says, that is bound up somehow, we go to sleep. But these senses are still there, the powers are still there. So somebody will come in the room and switch the light on, you'll wake, oh, put that damn light out, will you? Or something like that. The senses still operate. You know, you can go into somebody's room and say, hey, Joe, you there? You awake, Joe? And sooner or later, you'll wake up. The organs are still there, so they can stimulate and disturb everything. The estimative sense is very complex. Can anybody tell me what one of its important functions is? Instinct. The operation of estimative sense causes the animal to operate in certain manners. There's sort of a natural instinct there. For instance, the kookaburra. It'll see a snake, oh boy, it'll go after it. It'll grab it, fly it up into a tree and let it drop to break its back before it eats it. But what will another animal do? Oh, it'll back off. The dog will go woof, woof, woof. Or as a lady told us, the family one time, we were out in some bushland, and she said the thing that upset her most is when the cat brought in a dead snake. She didn't like that at all. But see, different reaction, estimative action. Now, sense consciousness makes us conscious that we're seeing, hearing, smelling, taste, or imagining it. So it's the balance wheel of the whole sensitive operation. The unitive sense. It can unite all of these. So if you're watching an opera, you can hear and see and know that you're hearing and seeing the same thing. So
when animals, pets, for example, respond to you,
when which animal, which?
an animal, a pet,
Oh, pet, yeah.
when they respond to you, they're using their estimative sense.
Oh, yes. Probably using all
They
the
also use the imagination.
Yes, yes, oh yes. They'll watch, and when they say a dog will stand at the front gate and look down the road, wondering when you're going to come, arrive home from work or something like that. And a cat the same way. And they'll know that, can remember your sight, what you look like, what you smell like, what you sound like. They'll recognize you from all those things, the past experience, and they'll estimate that as a good. But somebody might break into the house, you might estimate that as a bad. You see, and there comes into what we call estimations. No, I'm sorry, customizations. We'll deal with that later. In other words, they form a sort of a habit. You see, so in certain kind of habits we call it customization, where they're accustomed. That works on the nervous system. Yeah,
I'm just trying to distinguish between sensitive memory and imagination.
Well, sensitive memory, imagination first.
I mean, especially as it pertains to humans.
We'll come to that later, next class. Okay. Imagination is the storehouse of whatever we've sensed. All those imaginations you can have in the past.
Real,
but sensitive memory.
Real and imagined?
Yeah, even our dreamings, memories, etc. But the sensitive memory has the same thing, you might say. The characteristic here, things are known in their absence. But here, things are known in their absence as evaluated, good or bad. That's the difference. Yeah.
So, for example, that carrot cake that everybody loves,
mm-hmm.
Is that in the imagination? Is that memory stored in the absence of that cake?
No, that'd be more, yeah, well, it would be stored there too, but it's more in the sense of memory. Because, they say, oh, yummy, I like that.
And the image is in the imagination?
But
the image of the cake is in the imagination?
In imagination, yes.
It's the distinction between the image and the judgment of it.
That's true.
Is that right?
Yeah. The big important thing is its value is remembered.
Yeah. Okay.
In one case, just the image. In the other case, it's the value of the thing.
Okay.
So it's basically the judgment that we're talking about.
Well, no, you're going too far in saying it's what we call a
good bad.
Yeah, good bad, but it's what we call a natural prudence. That's what the instinct is. See, the instinctive. We're talking about brute animals, remember? And what you've done is you've both somewhat taken it a little too high. Talking about animals, they just have a sensitive memory. Say they might say carrot cake, whoo, 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 and go for it. But no immaterial judgment like in the judgment itself.
We had two very active young cats, and they loved to jump on the dining room table. So we discouraged them with a spray bottle. So they can be sitting across the room, and all I have to do is shake the bottle, and they jump off the table.
Exactly. That's the sensitive memory operating. They know that something's there. That's what I did with the tripod, the camera tripod, when I went with my two little nieces around the street. I gave the dog a good hell of a whack. You see, he went for the girls and didn't realise I was right behind. I gave him a hell of a whack. And they said, gee, Uncle, he doesn't go near us now. He seems to run when we go past. He was waiting to see if I was right behind them. I think I did it a couple of times. I can't remember. The second time I think I had to chase him because he saw me coming. And I went for him. I was down in Naples, Florida, and I went for a walk around the street, and there were two different occasions. I got them mixed up. One was in Niagara Falls. I went for a stroll around the street one night, just strolling around the DeVoe area. And a dog came low and mean, came straight for me. He's about that high, that big little thing. And I suddenly leapt up in the air and went, "Row!" He nearly turned himself inside out, trying to get away from me. But you should have seen the man standing on the front fence who just stared at me. He didn't try to stop it. He didn't say, "Here, boy," or something like that. And he stood stared as if to say, "My God, I've never seen anything like that before." Then he was in Florida. I was down in Naples visiting friends, and this is another big one came out. Woof, woof, woof. The woman yelled out, "Don't hurt him, he's got a bad heart." I would have eaten the bugger if I'd got near him. Anyway, see, animals do remember things. You've got to train them. And remember, we train an animal for our sake. We educate a child for its sake. Big difference. For its sake. That's not what certain politicians plan. People have said the state owns the child. Robespierre, for instance, said that in the French Revolution, etc. Danton said it, a lawyer in the French Revolution, and I've forgotten who it was, Wodieski or something in Russia. I published this as in one of the books we published. It's all there, the statement of these men. The child belongs to the state. That's complete rubbish. The child, if anything, belongs to the parent. And then the parent is moving all their lives to emancipate the child, teaching them so that they can live as a human person themselves. We've published 3 books on that, the authority of the parents in education, etc. So, I think we've come to the end of our tether tonight. So we'll take it up again next time. You're a very good audience tonight, as usual.